Alright, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back, everyone. We are very excited to have you all again, and we are excited to have Brother Naeem as well. Inshallah, we will go ahead and start without further ado.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. How are you guys doing? Hopefully everybody's doing well.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Doing well, man. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Good to hear from you. Good to hear somebody's voice. You sound really familiar. Who was that spoke?
My name is Ali. I don't think we've actually met, but who do you think I sound like?
I don't know, but your voice just sounds familiar, mashallah. Khair, well, if we haven't met, it's good to meet you, Ali.
Alhamdulillah, you too, bro.
So we'll continue from where we left off last week. I'm a bit unclear. I'm not exactly sure where we stopped. I think we stopped at I think we stopped at ayah 20. Or no, I think we may have stopped at ayah 19. Does anybody remember? If not, it's okay. I'll just start from there.
Yeah, pretty sure it was 19.
Did we complete 19 or we didn't start 19? We didn't start it, right?
No, I don't remember we did.
Okay. All right. Khair, Bismillah. So let me share my screen really quick. Let me know if you guys can see it. You guys see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وكذلك بعثناهم ليتساءلوا بينهم قال قائل منهم كم لبثتم قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم قالوا ربكم أعلم بما لبثتم فابعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف ولا يشعرن بكم أحدا. So continuing on from where we left last week, we are still in the middle of the story of the companions of the cave. And at this point in the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us of when He subhanahu wa ta'ala caused them to arise from their slumber. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ بَعْثْنَاهُمْ. Thus we raised them up, we caused them to be resurrected. لِيَتَسَاءَلُوا بَيْنَهُمْ. So that they would ask or discuss and ask amongst themselves. So that they would discuss, right? And again, as we mentioned last week, the point of this, like part of the reason why this took place, why their matter was made plain or was made clear or was brought to the attention of people, even to themselves, was for them to realize, right, the miraculous nature and take lesson from what took place. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they began to, discuss amongst themselves. One of them said, how long did you sleep? How long did we all sleep for? How long were we out? قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم. Some of them said, we slept for a day or part of a day. And some of the Mufassirun mentioned that, the reason this was that when they traveled by night, and they arrived somewhere in the morning time. And so when they woke up, they found that, they found that the sun was close to setting. So they said, well, we slept for a day. Then they realized, the sun is still setting. So maybe it's part of a day. All right, that's what some of the Mufassirun say about this statement. And perhaps it could have been because of, just how they felt when they woke up, right? Many of us have kind of had experiences where, we wake up and we're not exactly sure how long we slept for, right? Sometimes it may be that, we think we slept the whole night, especially we take a nap like late in the evening. And we wake up and it's dark. We think that it's like the next day or middle of the night. It ends up being like it's still the same night, right? Or vice versa. You think you slept for a little bit. You next thing you know, it's like halfway through the day. So, Allahu A'lam. So one of them said, we slept for a day, part of a day. Another said, قالوا ربكم أعلم بما لبثتم فبعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه. So the first group is kind of caught up in this conversation. Well, how long do we sleep? The second group says, your Lord knows best how long you slept, how long you stayed, right? How long you've been here. So right here, we see a shift in focus. We see a shift in focus, right? The second party amongst them is saying, look, it doesn't matter how long we slept, right? Let's not forget why we're here. Let's not forget what we're trying to accomplish here, right? So don't get too caught up on the minor details or things that aren't super important, right? What we know is that we're here, we're still alive, we still have a task in front of us. We still have to kind of survive this and wait this out and figure out what we're going to do. So the next order of business is, we need to sustain ourselves. We need something to eat, right? So let's not focus on the nitty-gritty details. Let's focus on what's important here and get back to that, right? And that's an important lesson for us to, when we're learning, when we're taking on a task, right? There's at every turn, at every, juncture, there's a point or there's the opportunity to lose focus, to kind of lose sight, to get too caught up in one thing, right? And to lose sight of the main focus, the main goal here. And so this is a lesson that we can take from this. So what is the first order of business? One of you needs to take some of this, this currency, this wealth, right? Take it to the city and find the best, the most pure food, right? So come and bring it back for us and be subtle, right? Be careful not to be noticed. Be very gentle and very, very subtle in how you move so that nobody can, nobody will notice you or, become aware of what took place, right? So as far as they're concerned, right, they woke up, they're still in the same time period. They have no reason to believe otherwise, right? And some of the Mufassirun say that, the group that said, your Lord knows best how long you slept, realized that they had slept for a very long time because perhaps some of the effects that took place on their body, be it, their hair or their nails or, some other physical effects. So they said, look, this is, much longer than we thought. So, that's why some of the Mufassirun say that the second group disagreed. But in any case, right, they say, go to the town, go to the city and get the most pure food. The word azka here is very interesting because what exactly does it mean? Right? Some of the Mufassirun say that, they are from the, as far as they were concerned, their townspeople didn't worship Allah, right? And their, that whole kingdom was based on falsehood and, their whole system of life was based on oppression and their whole manner of living, etc. So the most pure of food means for them to be careful not to take any food that was acquired or that was raised or that was slaughtered in an improper manner, right? So if it was slaughtered for other than Allah, for example, or if it was taken by means of force, or if it came from, an evil source. So be very mindful about the purity of your food and what you bring for us, and that it's only from the best sources. Another interpretation is that, that food which is most nourishing, that food which we can gain the most energy from and the most benefit from, right? So be careful and very particular to choose the best type of food so that we can, nourish ourselves from it, right? Another opinion mentions that it's actually in reference to, the cheapest food, right? Find like not cheap in quality, but cheap in terms of price, right? Because again, we have finite resources here, so we need to be mindful. And another opinion even mentions that it refers to the best tasting food, right? And there's a lot of reflections that we can take here. Starting from the beginning, we talked about how, you know, this whole worldview thing kind of filters into every aspect of our life, right? And so it's very important when we think about and consider what we consume. The spiritual journey, the relationship that we want to cultivate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't take place without the physical. The physical has ramifications on the spiritual has ramifications on the physical, just like, you know, every part of the body has an impact and effect on another, right? Every part of the existence has an impact on the other. And so to believe that, you know, we can be heedless or totally unmindful about what we consume, even down to the things that we eat, and assume that, you know, we don't have any really serious thought about that, but somehow we're gonna, you know, grow in our relationship or our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, is a false notion. So to be mindful about the source of your wealth, the source of your sustenance, right? Did you get it in a proper means, in a proper way? Was there oppression that took place in the process, right? And so, you know, the conversations that are out there around, you know, how things are sourced, for example, or, you know, is there a fair price paid, or, you know, what is the condition of, you know, everything in the supply chain of this thing, are very important for us to be mindful of, right? We can't just say, well, that's not really my concern, and whatever, it's all good, I'll eat whatever, I'll consume whatever, right? That's going to ultimately have an impact on our spirituality as well, our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's of noting that when we fast, for example, right, when we fast, we see that direct correlation, that connection between the physical and the spiritual in terms of most primarily what we consume and don't consume. You know, the second understanding, you know, that food which is most nourishing, right? Let's focus here. Let's make sure that we are getting what we need out of this food, not getting too caught up, right? What's gonna get us, you know, sustain us, support us in the best way, right? Are we gonna spend too much money on it, right? We have a limited amount of resources. You know, let's make sure that we're being diligent and mindful, right? So when we think about, say we're given a specific budget, right? And this might be pertinent to MSA, right? Or whatever, even in your own personal life. You know, I know for me personally, it was really sobering. It always is really sobering every month when you kind of review your expenses, or whenever you do, right? When you review your credit card statement or your bank statement or whatever the case is, and you see how much money is spent on food, right? Right, you can really see where your priorities lie when you like kind of track your spending. And then finally, the most tasty food, right? At the end of the day, this is still a group of young men that we're talking about, right? And so, you know, they're human beings too, just like we're human beings, and we love, you know, delicious tasting food. And so, doesn't mean that we have to compromise, right? The road to spirituality doesn't mean that you can't have nice things. It just means that you are in control of your soul, and you're in control of its consumption, not that your consumption is in control of you. وَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ وَلَا يُشْعِرَنَّ بِكُمْ أَحَدًا, right? Be mindful, because again, they don't want to get caught. إِنَّهُمْ إِنْ يَظْهَرُوا عَلَيْكُمْ يَرْجُمُوكُمْ أَوْ يُعِيدُوكُمْ فِي مِلَّتِهِمْ وَلَنْ تُفْلِحُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. If they find you out, if they, you know, if they notice you, if you're too hot, right, and they figure you out, they'll stone you to death. They'll kill you, or they'll return you back to their religion, or they'll return you back to their way of life, right? وَلَن تُفْلِحُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. And then you'll never succeed. You'll never find any success. This is kind of a view into their mindset, okay? For them, the prospect of death, or rather the prospect of losing their faith, is equal to the prospect of death. It means death. It's the same thing, right? Their spiritual death to them equates to their physical death. There is that, again, that connection between the physical and the spiritual. For them, life is not meaningful whatsoever without the correct belief in the correct way of living. So it's interesting to see what they fear here. Not only that they'll kill you, they will kill you, but just as bad, if they don't kill you, they'll force you to revert back to this other way of life, right? And that's very interesting for us to think about, right? What does this deen, what does this faith, what does this understanding mean to you? How valuable is it to you? What is life without it, right? Is life, meaningful without it or not, right? What does it mean to you, right? What are you willing to give up for it? وَلَن تُفْلِحُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, وَكَذَلِكَ أَعْثَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ وأن الساعة لا ريب فيها إذ يتنازعون بينهم أمرهم فقالوا ابنوا عليهم بنيانا ربهم أعلم بهم قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, thus we brought them to people's attention. So despite their efforts to go unnoticed, right? Again, this is also kind of an illusion, and we can take from it their sincerity, right? Because they really just want to stick to trying to preserve their deen. They're not really about really anybody else's attention or anything of that sort. But in spite of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought them to people's attention, brought their attention, or brought their affair, what took place with regards to them, to people's attention, right? Because there was a greater lesson here that they were that they were part of. And so another lesson here is that, we might find ourselves in situations where, for whatever reason or the other, we are in a position of attention. We are in a position of, being noticed for whatever reason or the other. The point is, we never go looking for that. And we should, as best as we can, try to avoid that, right? Our deen is not a deen of optics. And this is a very, easy trap to fall into, right? Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tells us in a hadith that what he fears for us, right? He doesn't fear that the believers, that the ummah will go back to worshiping idols or worshiping these false gods. But what he says is, I fear for you the insidious, the hidden shirk. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, what is the hidden shirk? What is this this covert, kind of hard to detect shirk that you're talking about? And he says, riya, right? That you show off, that you want your actions and your deeds, you want to be seen and noticed by others, right? You do things for the sake of others, right? He says this is just as detrimental to your faith. So again, it's quite interesting here that in certain situations, is this synonymous with hypocrisy? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. It's definitely a part of hypocrisy. And it definitely, is something that should be feared, right? In terms of kind of falling into hypocrisy. But hypocrisy is more, especially in the Islamic context, is more a concealing of one's true intentions, right? Where they appear to be, have the, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure in mind, or, and the well-being of the community, in mind, or in their actions, right? This is what this is what they show on the outside, but in reality, they want the exact opposite, right? They actually want the downfall of the community. They actually don't believe, they actually reject, right? So hypocrisy is a bit more, severe, but this definitely is and can be something that leads one to that path, right? There are signs of hypocrisy that the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, right? So you're definitely thinking along the right lines. وَكَذَلِكَ أَعْثَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought attention to their matter. لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ, so that they know that God's promise is true. And there's some conversation, وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا, and that the hour, the day of judgment, there's no doubt in it. And so the Mufassirun, they say about this that how were they brought to people's attention? In one opinion, it's that, when they came, people noticed that, they had really long hair and their nails had grown really long, and that, there's the remnants of them having had the effects of their sleep in their face that's noticeable, right? And so people notice, well, this has been a very long time. Another opinion is that when, the individual amongst them who went to go, acquire this food, when he brought out this money to pay for it, he brought out currency that was obviously outdated, hundreds of years, so, right, 300 years old. And so, the person who was, he was buying from thought, oh, this person they found some treasure, right? And so he said, well, no, this is just the money that I have. And so when they brought that affair to, they brought that matter to the attention of the ruler, he said, where did you get this money from? Where did you come across some treasure? Where did you find this? And they said, well, I just used it to buy some stuff yesterday, right? And so at that point they realized, well, what do you mean yesterday? Like, me and my friends were trying to get out. We're feeling, we were fleeing from the persecution of this ruler, such and such. And then they realized, okay, this person's from a different time, right? لِيَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ, so that they know God's promise is true. Some of the Mufassirun also mention about this, that at that time they, some of them mentioned that the ruler was a disbeliever, albeit a just ruler. He was still a just ruler, and so he denied or disbelieved in resurrection, or the concept of life after death. Another opinion is that, well, they were in conflict about whether the resurrection after death was only of the soul or also of the body, right? Is it a physical resurrection along with a spiritual one, or is it simply a spiritual resurrection? And so this matter, them coming, having come back into, into life after 300 years, 300 plus years, all right, was the clarification of that point, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing them that just like I brought, these individuals back to life after such a long period of rest, right? Thus the resurrection in the hereafter is also true, right? In a physical sense as well. إِذْ يَتَنَازَعُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ أَمْرَهُمْ, when they were arguing or disputing amongst themselves. There's also many opinions about what this dispute was about, right? Some say, again, like I just mentioned, it was about that concept of resurrection after death. Some saying, well, it's a physical one. Some saying, well, it's just a spiritual one. Others mention that it is, them disputing over what became of the companions of the cave, right? So after this incident, they go back to the cave. One of the opinion mentions that they go back to the cave, and then they are caused to die, right? After their affair is made known to everybody, they're caused to die, and then there was some dispute about whether they were actually dead this time or they had just gone back into slumber again. Another opinion is that this dispute was amongst themselves in terms of how long they slept for, how long they were out for, right? And so this matter of them being known, right, people finding them out, kind of brought clarification to that dispute. Another opinion even is that this dispute was amongst the who they were, what were their backgrounds, how many of them were there, etc., the details about themselves, right? We can take lessons from all of these, but the point is that through this resurrection, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarified all of these things. فَقَالُوا بْنُوا عَلَيْهِمْ بُنْيَانًا. And also another opinion is that this dispute was about what should be done with them, right? So after they're back in the cave, what should be done in that area? Some of them said, well, we should build a structure around, we should seal this cave and build a structure around it to commemorate it. And others said, well, we should build a place of worship here, right? Because they were disputing. Some of them said, well, they were Muslims. Some of them were saying, no, they were on the religion of the people of old, right? The disbelievers were saying they're on our way of life. The Muslims are saying, no, they're on our way of life. So the dispute over what should be done with that place. قَالَ الَّذِينَ غَلَبُوا عَلَى أَمْرِهِمْ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who were responsible, or those who prevailed in this dispute, they said, لَنَتَّخِذَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ مَسْجِدًا, right? We will construct a place of worship over them, right? Masjid, as we know, right? Place of sujood. So what's interesting here is that those who are prominent, those who prevailed in this issue, right? What was their concern with how these people would be commemorated, how this encounter would be remembered, right? There's plenty of amazing things that happen. And legacies are created from them, but oftentimes those legacies lose the point and lose the focus, right? When you think about, the closest example that comes to mind is Muhammad Ali, like rahimahullah, Muhammad Ali, right? A household name, right? Somebody that everybody in the country knows about, right? In the world, even, right? During his time, probably even now, the greatest athlete, the most prominent athlete to ever have lived, right? But even when you consider what he was about, what was his journey about? What were his life lessons about? What were the things he, talked about and called towards? Like, what was he really aiming at? When you think about that versus what is remembered of his legacy and what is focused on and what is not focused on, you find a complete loss of the message, of the focus. Likewise, you could say the same about Malcolm X, rahimahullah, right? You could say the same about many important figures. But the point is here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying there was dispute over how they should be remembered. Is this just going to be remembered as an amazing event, and kind of a bragging card for whoever was from their family or for whoever was from their people or from their city, right? To be like, oh, look at this amazing thing that happened. Or is the point going to be remembered? And the point is that this is a reminder of the hereafter. This is a reminder of a meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a reminder of valuing your relationship with Allah over all else. This is a reminder of trying to establish and live according to Allah's way on this earth. So those who prevailed said, we're going to commemorate and remember this, right, by building a place of worship here, so that everybody is reminded of what these people were about, these companions of the cave. What did they stand for? What was their entire encounter about, right? For us, we have to be very adamant about how the story is being told. How the story is being told. Is it being misrepresented? Is the main point being lost? And it's very subtle. It's very subtle the way the main point is lost sometimes, right? So even in the MSA sense, in the college sense, right? When you are organizing yourselves, right? Yes, social events may take place. Yes, community building takes place. Yes. And perhaps these are even goals. These are even objectives, of course, and they're great, amazing objectives. They should be. But, right, the ultimate objective always has to be developing a relationship with Allah, right? It's not just about, when we communicate what we are to the larger campus, to the larger community, right? Are we just simply communicating types of foods and types of dress, and, different names and different languages? And those are all beautiful things. But at the root of all that, are we communicating that what binds all of these things together is an awareness of Allah and a commitment to worship Him and live our lives in worship to Him? Is that being lost or not, right? So this is one of the lessons that we can take from this ayah. سيقولون ثلاثة رابعهم كلبهم ويقولون خمسة سادسهم كلبهم رجما بالغيب ويقولون سبعة وثامنهم كلبهم قل ربي أعلم بعدتهم ما يعلمهم إلا قليل فلا تماري فيهم إلا مراء ظاهرا ولا تستفتي فيهم منهم أحدا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سيقولون ثلاثة رابعهم كلبهم. They will say, right, some will say, or they say, that they were three, the fourth of them being their dog, right, about the number of how many people there were in the cave. Right, some will say that there were three, the fourth of them was their dog. And they will say that there were five, and the sixth of them was their dog, throwing stones in the dark. Rajman bil ghayb means throwing at the unseen or in the unseen. So it's like, throwing stones in the dark. وَيَقُولُونَ سَبْعَةٌ وَثَامِنُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ. And some say that they were 7 and the 8th of them was their dog. قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ بِعِدَّتِهِمْ مَا يَعْلَمُهُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. Say that my Lord knows best of their number, they know not except a little. فَلَا تُمَارِ فِيهِمْ إِلَّا مِرَاءً ظَاهِرًا. Don't argue and dispute and go back and forth with them except in an apparent manner, in what is clear, in the most surface or the most understood and clear aspects of it, right? Don't sit here and philosophize or equivocate or whatever, right? Get in this guessing game, but only stick to what is known. وَلَا تَسْتَفْتِ فِيهِمْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. And don't ask, don't seek the answer from any one of them. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about how, people get caught up or, people are in dispute about their number. And so some will say 3, their 4th was a dog. Some will say 5, the 6th was a dog. Rajman bil ghayb, Allah says, right? They're just throwing stones in the dark, right? And throwing stones in the dark is an interesting or kind of apt analogy here, because if you're throwing stones in the dark trying to aim at a target, right? First of all, you don't know what you're aiming at, and second of all, you don't know if you hit it. Right? If you do hit your target, you don't know that you've hit it, right? So Allah is saying there's no benefit in this like unnecessary arbitrary detail. There's arbitrary conversation. وَيَقُولُونَ سَبْعَةٌ وَثَامِنُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ. There's a lot of discussion about this, but a lot of the conversation, a lot of mufassirun say that this is actually the correct view because of how it comes in the ayah. Again, we're not going to get too much into that because again, it's not the detail that we're trying to focus on here. But what is the important part is this next part. قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ بِعِدَّتِهِمْ مَا يَعْلَمُهُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. Say, my Lord knows best about what their number is. They know not except a little. فَلَا تُمَارِ فِيهِمْ إِلَّا مِرَاءً ظَاهِرًا. Don't get into it with them, right? The only thing that you should affirm is not, they weren't, they were actually this number and that number. What you should affirm is that they actually did exist. And that what you should affirm is all this guessing game, all this back and forth is not the truth. Right? So mira and zahira means don't get into it except to confirm that which is known, that which is plain. And what's plain? That they did exist, their story did take place, that all this back and forth is fruitless, right? So focus on the point here. وَلَا تَسْتَفْتِ فِيهِمْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. And don't seek the answer from any one of them. Why? Because Allah already says they don't know. Allah knows, right? So this isn't something that's worth, really asking anybody else about who is no more knowledgeable than you, right? Or is in fact even less knowledgeable than you. From this, we kind of understand a great lesson about, what the purpose is behind when we debate or when we have a conversation about something, right? When we are in a conversation, when we are in a dialogue, a discussion, a debate even, right? We should focus on, again, what is important. The story of the companions of the cave is not about their number. It's not about how long they slept. It's not about what their dog, what breed their dog was. It's not about any of that. It's about a group of young people who, against all odds, right, try to uphold and maintain their relationship with Allah. So if anything you're going to discuss or affirm or go back and forth about, let it be that, right? And we can apply this to any other, topic of conversation or discussion that we get into, right? Are we getting, anything that pertains to knowledge? Are we getting caught up in unnecessary details? Are we, going too far down, an unrelated path? Is the conversation now veering from what we were actually trying to accomplish, etc.? And again, if there's any conversations, questions, thoughts, please feel free to unmute and kind of share them or share them in the chat, inshallah. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ وَقُلْ عَسَىٰ أَن يَهْدِيَنِي رَبِّي لِأَقْرَبَ مِنْ هَذَا رَشَدًا. Do not say of anything that I will do such and such thing tomorrow, except if Allah wills. right? We talked about when we're talking about the introduction to the surah. We said that the disbelievers, they came and they asked the Prophet ﷺ 3 questions, trying to, basically validate or affirm his prophethood through them. And the Prophet ﷺ responded saying that I will give you the answer to these things tomorrow. And then, extended period of time passed, 15 days, some say even 40 days, before an answer was given, right? And what's mentioned here is that the Prophet ﷺ forgot or did not mention, inshallah, when he made that promise, or when he mentioned that he'll bring the answer tomorrow. In any case, the lesson comes: do not say about anything that I will do such and such tomorrow, except if Allah wills, right? There's a couple of different understandings here, right? One understanding is the obvious one, which is don't say that you're going to do something unless you say inshallah, unless you add saying inshallah with that thing. The other is that you won't be able to say that you'll do something tomorrow except if Allah wills, right? You being able to say that will not happen except if Allah wills for it to happen. And so there's another important lesson, right, that we kind of learn here, is that, well, why did the Prophet ﷺ not say inshallah? Or how did he not say inshallah, right? Somebody who is constantly in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's remembrance, constantly in contact with that spiritual reality, right? What we understand is that this is something that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was made to forget, or something that he was made to omit, so that this lesson could be learned, right? There's certain things that take place in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where we learn lessons from them. For example, we would never know the ruling on how we should go about making up a rak'ah in the salah, for example. Or if we missed something in the salah, how do we go about remedying that, right? What do we do in that situation? There's no way we would ever have learned that unless Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was made to make that, omit that part in the salah and then demonstrate what to do, right? So in any case, the lesson is learned here that nothing that we intend, no good action, nothing that we plan to do can take place without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. And so we should say, inshallah, وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. Remember your Lord when you forget. وَقُلْ عَسَىٰ أَن يَهْدِيَنِي رَبِّي لِأَقْرَبَ مِنْ هَذَا رَشَدًا. Right, there's a few different conversations here as well. Remember your Lord when you forget. So if you forget to say inshallah, say it when you remember. Another opinion is that when you forget to say inshallah, make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's remembrance when you realize that you forgot, right? So say subhanallah, alhamdulillah, astaghfirullah, whatever the case is, right? Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it becomes apparent to you that you forgot. Another understanding is that it's not that limited to when you say inshallah. So whenever you forget something, for example, right, make mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name in order for you to remember that thing. And this is why you find a lot of individuals for this and other reasons as well, that, for example, when you lose something, you forget where you place something, right? People in that moment are making mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, right? There's dua that they mention, right? And so it could be even broader to refer to that. All of these are great lessons, right? So we should kind of implement and try to apply all of them. وَقُلْ عَسَىٰ أَن يَهْدِيَنِي رَبِّي لِأَقْرَبَ مِنْ هَذَا رَشَدًا. Say, I hope and I make dua and perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide me, right, to what is even more correct or even better than this, right? What's closer to something closer to that which is right. So one opinion is that, right, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that he'll answer these questions for them, right? It's a reminder to say that I will bring you the answer to these questions and something that is even better, that is even closer to bringing you to right guidance, right? Even more broadly applying to us, like if I intend to do this, I intend to do something, I say inshallah I'll do it, and even better will come from it than what I intend, right? And the other understanding is that when you forget to say inshallah, you make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides you to that which is better, that for as basically a recourse and retribution as a response for that mistake and that error, right? So what is better in that understanding is saying inshallah. Does that make sense? So I forgot to say inshallah. I remember Allah when I forget, and I say that Allah, I make dua that Allah guides me to that which is better, and basically, forgives me for making that error and guides me to that which is better, which is, saying it and making more mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, right? So all of these, again, are acceptable understandings, and all of these are things that we can take great lesson from. وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ 300 سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا تِسْعًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they stayed in their cave for 300 years and they increased 9. Right? There's interesting wording here because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say they stayed in their cave for 309 years. He says that they stayed in their cave for 300 years and they added, right? وَازْدَادُوا تِسْعًا. They have added 9 more. There's some conversation here, right? One understanding is that, well, 300 is in reference to the calculation by solar years, and 309 is a calculation by lunar years, because lunar years are a little bit shorter, and so that would amount to more. Another understanding is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning what is most, like 300 being that which kind of most closely sums up how long they stayed, and then adding 9 to that is kind of the exact specification of it, right? So for example, we even mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ lived 1400 years ago. Well, it wasn't exactly 1400, it's 1430 something, right? So in that similar manner, 300 and then specifically 309, right? 9 on top of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but this is what's mentioned in regards to this ayah, right? قُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that Allah knows best how long they stayed, right? The focus is always being brought back to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so another important lesson is that what we don't know, we can't know what we know without Allah. We can't know what we know without Allah. And especially the matters of the unseen, especially the matters of, that there is much dispute about in terms of history, right? Anything that falls into the unseen, right? I.e. outside of our realm of understanding. There is no way for us to know that without Allah. And so we shouldn't get caught up in the back and forth of, worrying about this or that too much. And we should focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what He wants us to take from it, right? Now, this doesn't mean, well, I have an exam coming up. There's no way for me to know what I know without Allah. And so, I'm not going to study, right? No, that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put the means for your understanding in front of you, right? And so in the process of you trying to understand that thing, you also seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help, because even though you might seek the effort or might seek the means, right? You may not arrive at that understanding. So you do seek those means. And then you also, on top of that, solicit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's support. In this situation, there's not a means to understanding this outside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly informing. There's no way that we would have known about this had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So Allah says, قُلْ لَهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا لَهُ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah knows best how long they stayed. For Him are the secrets, the unseen aspects of both the heavens and the earth. أَبْصِرْ بِهِ وَأَسْمِعْ. أَبْصِرْ بِهِ وَأَسْمِعْ. Right? This is what in Arabic is called ta'ajjub, right? Which is to say that, an expression of amazement or an expression of awe at something, right? أَبْصِرْ بِهِ وَأَسْمِعْ. That how encompassing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge through what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees. But also, it can be understood as an expression of amazement, of almost as though to say like look and see at them trying to fumble around, like look and hear what they say and what they do, trying to fumble around and understand this thing without any knowledge, right? how is it that, you know, they're trying to do that? So it's a statement of amazement of somebody who is trying to, you know, arrive at knowledge of something, having or claim or express knowledge about something while they're in ignorance of it. ما لهم من دونه من ولي ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا. Allah says, they do not have any supporter or protector besides him, besides Allah, and no one else shares in his rule. Okay, ما لهم من دونه من ولي. Who is this? You know, who is this lahum, like with them, right? Who is that referring to? Some of the Mufassirun mentioned that it refers to the companions of the cave themselves, right? There was no protector for them but Allah, and Allah was sufficient for them. Others mentioned that it's in regards to those who dispute about this issue without any knowledge, right? That claiming false things, right? Speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge carries consequences. And so nobody will be able to protect anybody from the consequences of these things that they say just without any thought or without any reasoning, without any understanding. No one will be able to protect that person from the consequences of that except Allah. So ultimately, imagine you are, you know, claiming with confidence and certainty something about Allah which you have no knowledge of. And then you have to meet Allah and answer for that thing, right? On that day, you won't have any protector from Allah or any protector from that consequence except Allah. Okay, وَلَا يُشْرِكُ فِي حُكْمِهِ أَحَدًا, and there is no one else that shares in his decree, in his command, in his rule. So whether it be this issue, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word is the word on it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's a decision or rule about this issue is the only one that there is. And likewise, when it comes to any other matter, right? There is no partner or associate when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rule. It is his and his solely. And so again, another point of kind of reflection and reminder for us, right? That not only with this matter, but more broadly, you think about the companions of the cave, right? Their people at their time wanted them dead. And they were kings and they had every resource and they had every ability and they had every opportunity to do so. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided, and his rule was that they would not be, that they would be preserved. And so no one can override that or overrule that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that they would come back to life, that their story would be known, that their story would be preserved, and no one else can share in that. Likewise, when it comes to our own lives, right? What happens and what we seek from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we are afraid of, nothing can take place or come to us except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decision. And so instead of, you know, going to this person and that person and turning our attention here and there, we should first turn our attention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognize that the decisions, whatever will come to be, is will only come through his decision, right? And this kind of even ties into saying inshallah, reminding and tethering those things, those intentions, those hopes that we have for ourselves in the future, tethering that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command and his will. وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ وَلَنْ تَجِدَ مِنْ دُونِهِ مُلْتَحَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to follow and recite and convey what has been revealed to you from the book of your Lord. There is no changing of his words. And there is no refuge that can be sought and found except with him. So this is kind of this last ayah that we finished, right? Ayah number 26 is the end of the account of the companions of the cave. And from ayah 27 forward, we now take lesson from their account, but also broader lessons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the Prophet of. With this ayah in particular, right? The disbelievers of Quraysh, of Mecca, right? We said again, just a reminder that this is Mecca revelation. So you have to understand in context that the believers are still in a position of difficulty. They're not in a position of power just yet. So the disbelievers of Mecca, they had an objection, right? They had many objections, but one of their objections to the message of the Prophet ﷺ had nothing to do with the message itself, but had to do with those who associated with it, okay? And this sentiment is shared by all tyrannical, disbelieving people throughout the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings us mention of. So their issue was, look, we can't associate with those lowly people, you know, those laborers, those poor people, those enslaved people, you know, those people who aren't from our lineage, from our descent. We can't be seen with them. We can't associate with them. We can't, you know, live according to some sort of way of life that that they're on, right? If it was so good, how did they beat us to it, right? If it was something so amazing, obviously we would have got it first. So that was one of their objections. The other was, okay, if it's so great, then it can't be appropriate for them. So, you know, we're not going to associate with it, right? And again, this is mentioned in plenty of places of the Quran. Nuh alayhi salam, right, one of the earliest prophets, his people had the same objection. وَمَا نَرَاكَ اتَّبَعَكَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَرَاذِلُنَا بَادِيَ الرَّأْيِ وَمَا نَرَى لَكُمْ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ فَضْلٍ بَلْ نَظُنُّكُمْ كَاذِبِينَ. Right, we don't see anybody following you except the lowly, the most denigrated people amongst us. You know, the people, the most, you know, backwards minded, most unintelligent, etc., etc. Again, many places in the Quran this is mentioned, right? So this was the objection of the disbelievers. They said, look, if you want to talk to us, it has to just be us. We have to dissociate. And so instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving guidance, وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ, say exactly that which is given to you, exactly that which is revealed to you, no more, no less, and there will be no changing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word, right? This is not something that's here to cater to you and your sensibilities and your proclivities and your preferences or whatever. This is the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you accept it, it's for your own benefit. If you reject it, it's to your own detriment, right? It's not here to serve you and your you know, false priorities. And so again, we should think about this in context. When we think about how we want Islam to fit into our broader society, there are so many directives, so many understandings, so many thoughts and conversations about, okay, you should practice your Islam this way. This articulation of your Islam is appropriate. This articulation of Islam should be, you know, thrown away, whatever, so that it can fit within our whatever ism, whatever system of whatever, governance, living, whatever, right? So, you know, you don't necessarily really have to do away this part. This part is really just understood ceremoniously. This part is, you know, not really practiced anymore, whatever. Allah says, "La mubaddila li kalimat." This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's revelation, his book, his guidance, right? You either accept it as is, right? Or you don't. But there is no picking and choosing. Allah says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dukhulu fi silmi kaffah." O you who believe, enter into this submission into Islam completely, in totality. And that's not to say that we have to be perfect, but there's a big difference between saying, okay, I struggle with this thing, though I understand it to be something that I should be doing, or understand it to be something that I should not be doing based on what Allah said, but I struggle with it and I'm not yet there, versus saying, well, this doesn't make sense, this is backwards, this we should do away with. Ultimately, you have to ask yourself, in that situation, who are you worshiping? Ultimately, you might be worshiping whoever that directive is coming from, whoever that objective is coming from. If you're tailoring your faith towards, you know, what this sensibility or that, even if it comes from yourself, it may be that you're worshiping yourself, right? So this is the theme that these next few ayats are gonna start discussing. So, inshallah, we'll conclude here. I did want to go through a little bit more, but I don't want it to take us too far past time. So inshallah, next week or are we meeting next week? I know people are on break.
No, we aren't.
Okay. So inshallah, in a couple weeks we'll circle back. I do hope that we can conclude within three more meetings. Hopefully, I'm gonna try to hold myself to that. So inshallah, we'll have three more of these. But hopefully, if we're not able to, then we'll play that by ear. So inshallah, we'll start from ayah 28 in a couple weeks. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overlook any of our shortcomings, anything that we said that was an error. We ask that Allah forgive. Anything that we said that was truthful, that was accurate, was only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing and His bounty, and that we thank Him for it. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people who understand and constantly try to grow in our relationship with the Quran. Make us people who act upon its guidance, make us people who remember its lessons, who live our lives according to it. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people who value His way and His love and the relationship with Him over all else, just like the companions of the cave did. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people of consciousness, people who are aware of the hereafter and live our lives in this world according to our understanding that there is a hereafter and that will be held to task. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the highest levels of Jannah and protect us and our loved ones from the hellfire. Are there any questions or thoughts before we conclude? Okay. Khair, inshallah. With that, we'll close. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Barakallahu feekum wa iyaakum to everybody. Inshallah, enjoy your break. Please keep us in your dua. Please keep Surah Kahf in your recitation. And we'll talk soon, inshallah, hopefully in a couple weeks. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.